Okay. Good to go. Called meeting to order.
Yes, sorry.
Okay,
Yes.
so calling the meeting to order. We'll start with with Keith's weather report. Is
Keith, yeah, he's on there. I'm going to ask him to unmute. Just like people muted.
Okay, how about are we on now, Niles?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Hi, Keith.
And especially to you, Niles, Susan, Arthur, Todd, and Jeffrey. Keith Allen, the weatherman, is here with the weather report and a little while later with the engagement committee report. Now, with the exception of maybe a few showers on Sunday, the weather looks dry and tranquil right through next week. Temperatures mostly in the 60s and just a bit windy tomorrow. The warmest ever in April that was recorded here in Washington, D.C. was 95 degrees on April 18th, 1976, which just happened to be Easter Sunday that year. We won't be seeing that this April, guaranteed. We should average out right around normal for the rest of April, mid to upper 60s to around 70, with below normal rainfall. Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, Keith. That sounds like a good report. We'll take it. Okay, so next we'd like to hear resident comments, and residents are reminded that these meetings are recorded. If you plan to make a comment, please state your name and your street address for the record. And please be mindful that we do have a 2-minute limit on comments so that other residents are allowed to speak or given an opportunity. Do we have any residents? I'm not seeing the whole gallery, so I can't really tell.
All right. It looks like either Peter or Susan Kahn, I think, had their hand up. I don't know which one you want to go with first.
Okay. One of the Kahns, please.
Okay.
Peter or Susan Kahn?
Susan, you want to go first?
Hi, Peter.
Hi there. Okay. Let me get my... Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to offer a few comments tonight. My concern focuses on the upcoming election and the election plan that was issued by the committee. There are substantial differences between this year's plan and last year's. For example, the 2020 plan did not require a legible name and address or suggest that an illegible signature on the ballot could be grounds for disqualification. As someone whose signature has at times been called illegible by others, this worries me a bit. Likewise, this year's plan says that ballots may be spoiled and not counted without giving any hint of how a ballot may be spoiled. Further, last year's plan identified ballot envelopes as legitimate by a random number placed on the envelope and identified with a specific voter by a list not available to the persons considering the envelopes. This year's plan requires a legibly printed name and address on the envelope, as well as a control number, allowing the identity of the voter to be determined from the envelope at the time a decision on the acceptability of the ballot is being made. Because of these new provisions in the election plan, I think that in order to have a fair, credible election, the Elections Committee should adopt some safeguards. First, I think the committee should present to the community a list of all the possible reasons that an envelope or a ballot may be deemed invalid. For example, the plan states that envelopes switched between family members will result in invalidation of both ballots, but I've been assured by the village manager that in fact this will not be disqualifying. Thus, in order to make clear to residents what actually is disqualifying, a complete list of all the possible causes that may result in invalidation of either the ballot or the envelope should be made. Second, because the voter can be identified on the outside of the ballot, not just by a signature, but by a legibly printed name and address, I think it's essential as a safeguard that observers be allowed to examine all envelopes that are under consideration for disqualification, and that the observers be allowed to lodge a protest as to any ballot envelope they feel does not meet the grounds for disqualification. I suggest these protests be heard by the council before ballots are forwarded to the election service provider, so as to permit those ballots to be counted with the others. Under the current plan, observers are allowed only to observe the tallying, review, and certification, quote unquote, and not the ballot disqualification process. And I believe this threatens the credibility of the election. Finally, the community should be entitled to know how many ballots and ballot envelopes have been disqualified and the reasons for those disqualifications. For that reason, I think the committee should issue a final report to the community that includes an enumeration of the number of envelopes received, the number of envelopes disqualified and their reasons, the number of ballots disqualified and the reasons for that, and the number of votes for each candidate. It's worth noting that the current plan makes no mention of any report at all, and this is at variance with longstanding practice of elections committees in the village. Thank you for your attention to these concerns.
Thank you, Peter. I suspect these will all be addressed later, but thank you for making your comments. Anyone else?
I could talk if there's no others.
Yeah.
I think you're on.
Okay,
Got
thanks.
it.
My name is Susan Kahn, and just trying to go.
Hi, Susan. Before you go, Miles, is there a way for you to mute all the phone lines?
Yeah, I'm
That's
doing
what's
that
creating
now.
all the echo.
I'm doing it now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sorry, Susan. Just want to be able to hear you clearly.
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Niles.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. It's wonderful to have this right to vote kind of sacred, and it's an awesome responsibility to count the votes. So I really want to thank the elections committee and the contractor, the observers, the manager, and everyone involved in conducting the election. I want to encourage whoever is involved in this process to remember we're all residents of the village, part of the same team, with the common goal of having our votes count. In the 2020 election, procedures indicated that while each ballot return envelope had a printed place for a voter's signature and signatures were required, at the same time, ballot envelopes will not be rejected due to any errors or variations on the form. That's what was written before. Since the same contractor used last year and this year assigns a unique control number to each ballot, there were and are other ways to verify ballots. No ballots at all were disqualified last year based on what was written or not written on the outside of the envelope. It was also official VMA procedure that if the election committee can reasonably ascertain the intent of the voter, that vote shall be counted. And last year, if two voters at the same address switched their return envelopes by mistake, the committee shall verify the voter's shared address on the voter roll and accept both ballot envelopes as legitimate. But the 2021 election plan has changed. It currently says that the voter must put their full name and sign their name and put their address on the envelope. Unlike in previous elections, the 2021 plan states that ballots enclosed in an incomplete, illegible, or unsigned return envelope will not be counted. The ballot envelopes must be, quote, properly completed, unquote. The plan says a proper ballot must not have a canceled or spoiled envelope. But what are specific examples of that? The determination of legibility and what is proper have a subjective component. I encourage the election committee to err on the side of accepting rather than rejecting the votes of tax-paying residents. I encourage you to think of village residents as part of one big extended family and not to overlook the vote of Grandpa Bob or Aunt Joan. Grandpa Bob may end up writing his first name as Bob rather than Robert. He might write Summit Avenue and overlook writing the number of his house. Aunt Joan may have a shaky hand when she signs her signature. If his signature is not especially legible or is not precisely the name sent in the original address, please look at the unique control number that each ballot is assigned and avoid tossing those ballots. I encourage the Village and Election Committee to give us a simple bulleted list describing what they want residents to write on the return ballot envelope and to communicate ways they could conceive of a ballot being disqualified. I understand the voters should print their first and last name on the ballot envelope, should sign their first and last name, and should write the house number and the street name and the date. But I'm not certain of that, so I need to have guidance. But if all those items are not filled in or perfectly legible, I encourage you to accept and count votes as they have been in the past, since ensuring the right to vote and to have one's vote counted in Martin's editions should be a goal we all share. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Lynn Welly would like to.
Okay.
Yeah,
If not, then
Susan,
Larry?
I'd like to speak.
Okay.
I totally agree with both what Peter and Susan have said. In fact, as a candidate, I sent an email to the election committee asking those very similar questions. And I was told, or all of us, the candidates were told, that the committee would follow the practices they did last year, and but they would be also using legal counsel for advice on a case-by-case basis. What's absolutely stunning about that statement is that all of the changes that have been just discussed were made by the very people who are saying that they need legal counsel to interpret their own words they wrote just a few months ago, where they very much clearly stated that they must reject the votes on the basis of the descriptions that were described today. So the answer given to the candidates was not an accurate answer. In fact, it was an empty answer that misdirected us.
Okay. Would anyone else like to speak?
I have my hand up, Lynn Welly, Oxford Street.
Okay. Hi, Lynn.
There was going back to the election, there was somewhere in the vicinity of 6 o'clock this evening, there was a response with regard to correspondence being distributed to the community with regard to the election. And in that response, there seems to be adding confusion rather than clarity to the election plan. The confusion is the added statement that the ballots do not have to be sent back on the day they're received or immediately received. They just have to be postmarked no later than the 13th or received by this date. This was not a statement in the original election plan, and I think it tends to add confusion rather than clarity. And so if that response, which was sent this around 6 o'clock today, could be reworded for clarification, I think it would be beneficial to everyone.
Okay, so just to clarify and elaborate, you're referring to this orange mailing that some residents, apparently most residents in the village received from Holly Worthington? Is that what you're referring to?
I really don't know, because the email from the village this evening did not make specific reference to any one correspondence. It just said stuff that's being distributed in the community, and I'm not responding to anything that Holly Worthington sent out. I'm responding only to what the email that came out this evening from the village, which makes the statement that a ballot does not have to be returned immediately. That to me is adding confusion rather than clarity, and it doesn't coincide with what the original election plan or the official election plan stated. That was not stated in the original election plan, and for some people in this community, this is going to add confusion rather than clarity. I don't think we need any more confusion. So,
Okay, well, as I said earlier, the election committee will be addressing these issues during their session tonight. But I am quite certain that the original election plan did contain dates for the last date that it could be mailed and the received date. The flyer that Holly Worthington sent says
I'm not,
the ballot must
talking.
be mailed in right away
I am
after you
not-
get it,
I'm
which
not
is
talking
probably
about
a
Holly.
little less specific than a
I'm not talking
mail
about
by,
Holly
received by.
Worthington's flyer. I'm only talking about the email that was sent out by the village.
Okay, but it was in
But-
response to that. Okay.
Well,
So-
but the response from the village did not specify Holly Worthington's letter.
Yeah, they should have actually said the Holly Worthington letter, because that was, I think they were trying to,
The fact of the matter, it did not.
Okay.
So we're all left to speculate. Was there other correspondence that was distributed? And if
Not that I know
so,
of.
by whom and when? We don't know. So I can only take what's in front of me.
so can we all.
And so we need clarification. Are we gonna go with the original election plan as outlined? Or do we have to go with the revisions and the new wording as it comes along from time to time? What is going to prevail?
As I said.
I would like to know that it's the original election plan and none of the stuff that has come in after that.
I could just say, I agree with Lynn. The original election plan spoke of May 6th, and this letter, this email that went out tonight from the village spoke of May 13th, and I think that's a confusion between the original election plan that we were issued and this new email. I don't think it relates to Holly Worthington's letter at all.
We'll talk about it. When we can actually have the election experts on, let's let them speak to these issues.
May I suggest then that when the election people are on, that it opens to a community comment when it is on subject with the election people?
If we can restrict our comments to a reasonable length of time and very pointed comments, that probably would be useful. So let's move along now if we don't have any more election comments.
I actually, this is Marty Langland, Chestnut Street, former election commissioner for quite a few years. I just want to encourage all residents to, in fact, do mail your ballot return envelopes sooner rather than later. I'm quite concerned as a candidate about the postal delays we've had, which we were a little bit worried about last spring and are, again, more worried about now. And I'm actually encouraging people to get their ballot envelope in the mail 2.5 weeks before the cutoff date. Cutoff date, they have to be received by May 20th. And at last month's meeting in March, the council meeting, I think it was Councilmember Jeff Blander said, could we please extend that from May 20th to the 27th, which personally I thought was a good idea, although I didn't speak to it at that time. But I am worried about ballots still being, in transit on May 20th if they're not mailed till the 13th. And so I would ask residents to please be very mindful of the fact that we do have postal delays, and I understand that the ballots have to reach New Jersey where the contractor is. So I would encourage people to, pick a date, Monday, May 3rd, as your target date to mail, just to make sure your ballot does get counted, because any ballot that, would otherwise be valid but doesn't arrive by May 20th won't be counted. And I think what Susan said about the way we really should think of each other as a family and try to make sure all of each other's votes are counted. That's certainly been the guiding principle for the election committee in prior years. And so please do mail. Don't wait till the last minute to mail your ballot. As a candidate, I'm asking you to please vote early so we can make sure that all votes do get counted, because that does matter for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've had a personal experience recently with the U.S. Postal Service. It took 12 days to get correspondence from here to outside of Philadelphia. And to make sure that it would get there faster, I actually mailed it from the Gaithersburg Regional Distribution Center thinking it would get there faster. But that did not work. 12 days. So time is of the essence. And I agree with what Marty has said, that our ballot envelope should be mailed back to the service provider as early as possible.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any non-election related topics?
Yes.
Or something that hasn't already been discussed?
Yes.
Proposed.
Yeah.
Susan Post?
You're
Oh, Susan,
Can you
you're on
unmute?
mute.
Muted.
You have to unmute yourself, Susan. Maybe Niles, you can do it from your
I've
end.
got it.
All right.
Okay. Somewhere recently I saw ballot statements by all the candidates. But I can't find it anymore. Was that a mailing or I can't find anything online
It's
on the website under elections or the election committee or anything?
Susan. It's on the council election page.
Yeah.
If you go to the council election page, they have their names there. If you click on the names, it will open. It should open a PDF with the statements. If you have an issue accessing the statements, I can also send them to you as PDFs as well.
I'm looking for it.
Okay, here.
Oh, okay. Okay. I see it. It was misleading because there's an election committee link.
Right.
I guess I went to that.
And that's the committee page, so
Yeah,
that's where
okay.
they do their
Okay,
business.
thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments?
I have a different subject to talk about.
Okay.
The current contract with Waste Management expires at the end of June this year.
Yes.
Is that being looked at?
Yes, it is.
Yep. And we are in the process. We'll talk about it later this evening during the manager's report. But we are going to be releasing very soon the invitation to bid on that, and we're going to have it, and that should be the due date around that is around the middle of May, so that people can do that. Okay.
I've been going through the existing contract with a fine-tooth comb and find some glaring things that should be corrected with the new contract with whoever that happens to be.
All right. Feel free to send me your comments.
Thanks. Thank you, Lynn. So now we can approve the minutes if we are finished with resident comments.
Oh, one other thing.
Okay.
There was on the meeting notes tonight. Maybe we can talk about this when the subject comes up, and that's the garage door with. Can we have community comment on subject at that time?
Why don't you just tell us what you'd like to say now, because we may be getting pretty short on time by then.
Well, this is as far as I know, this is the first that I or other people that have questioned me about it have heard about it, and so is this something you guys are voting on tonight, or is this an introduction for future discussion to be determined later in the year?
We're just discussing it tonight.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we can vote to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
Hi, Susan. This is Jeff Blander here. I'll make this short, but I just want to say that I'm going to vote. I do not approve these minutes for two reasons. The first, I just want to comment that I do want to really commend Niles and Martha. They did a wonderful job. I think there's a lot of exceptional detail, and I told Niles this, and he knew that I was going to raise an issue. I want to just mention that there's some substantive comment that was omitted, which I think was really important. And while it included things about how I really felt that we needed to have more respect and kindness and inclusiveness, actually the specific comments that were said at the meeting towards the end were not included. So it didn't give the context. I won't call those out now because other people can listen to the audio, but it was something that was very hurtful to me. And it had shaken me so much, actually, to the point that what I did is, and I'm going to make this very short, I promise. I know that time is not available to us, but Niles, would you just allow me to screen share to flash something real quick?
Okay, try now.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Bear with me. Here we go. I'll make this real short. Oh, I think I shared. the wrong document. I promise I will get this right. Here we go. So this is just something which I'm going to work on, and it's a pledge of conduct. And I had sent a note right after, within 24 hours, to the committee that had worked on the ordinance. And I had my heartfelt feelings for them that they did a job that they were tasked to do. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but I respectfully had reached out to them. And in the course of that, there were some comments about just the tone. And so I just put this out. I wanted to share with everyone that the comments that were said at the end of the meeting that were directed towards me were very upsetting to me. So I had come up with the idea of a pledge of conduct that we would have both at meetings, open meetings, task force, committee, but the idea of behavior and what is unacceptable, and the idea of harassment, intimidation, but just the idea of bringing together some more kindness of how we treat each other, which is so important. And I'm going to be working on this through now, but also with the next council, because I think this is, at the end of the day, probably the most important thing that we could do. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over, and thank you for yielding time.
Okay, and with respect to the minutes, there was another inaccuracy or a failure, and as you stated, there was so much detail in that meeting, and there were so many things to record that I think Martha and Niles did a fantastic job in capturing most of the comments. But there was one comment in which I corrected the fact that you had attended a meeting and that you said you didn't know about, and that the minutes were not posted or were posted inaccurately or something, that there was a complaint registered at the meeting, which wasn't accurate, and I asked for a correction, and you said, we'll talk about it offline, which we didn't do. So with that, I am willing to accept the minutes, and if anyone would like to vote on them at this point, I hope the council will put this issue behind us. Okay. Council, please. Anyone make a motion? Okay, do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Have we lost all our council members? I think.
Thanks. I already said I'm not approving, and Susan, I still don't know what you exactly said, but again, let's take it offline. Thank you.
This time we will take it offline. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so we have 3 people here. Do we have 3 other council members here? Do we have a motion to approve last minutes?
I'll also move.
Is
Arthur? If Arthur's not here, I'll move.
okay.
Where's Arthur?
I'm not.
I believe Todd moved it.
Yeah.
I believe Todd moved.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can second. You can second, Susan, if you want to go ahead and second.
And
Yep. And then you can vote. I'll try to call Arthur. I'm not sure where he is, so I'll work on that.
But I don't see him.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you two can 2-1 at this point.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll
all right.
do that.
So now we're ready for committee updates, and I think we start with the CEC, and that would be Keith.
Hi again, Susan.
Hi.
Niles, am I on?
Yes, you are.
You are.
Okay.
I'm going to mute myself though.
Okay. Hello again, everyone. Present at the Community Engagement Committee meeting were my fellow committee members, Renee Redpath, Sally Van Tassel, Jeffrey Blander, and Natalie and Lynn Welly, and a nice representation of residents also present. What I want to do here real quick would produce Matt and Jordan Cantor at 3503 Turner, 2 Martin's editions, and we hope to have them as well as other new residents on Zoom. Come. Okay, the topics that we discussed were for us to be prepared to have an Independence Day picnic if the county opens up in time to host this
Arthur,
event.
Did you,
July 4th just happens to
okay.
be
Okay.
which is perfect.
Okay, I will deal with
A lot of families
just hang
still
on the
might
line
be
for-
reluctant to travel, so we could have
Okay.
a record number of families attend.
Stay on this call right now.
If we
and
don't
and
hold a
once you
picnic,
get
it
back
was
in, we'll be
suggested
fine.
that we
Okay.
have block parties on several streets with residents bringing their own food and beverage. Now, if we have the event at Shepherd Park, we'll have to get a permit in May, 2 months in advance. The movie in the park on Labor Day weekend and the Halloween parade should be held for certain with no restrictions. We had some other ideas which included yard parties, Shakespeare in the park, a very good idea, and a Victory Garden gift bags. This would be to promote goodwill, especially the spring Victory Garden. And the roles of our street captains was talked about welcoming new residents. As I mentioned, that I'd like to do at meetings in the future to get the people there to introduce themselves. And other ideas that were discussed included stopping by the Olympia Cafe and other shops to let those folks know how much we appreciate them being there for us as frontline workers and just how important they are to our community here in Martin's Additions, especially with the inequality, awful and disrespectful way the Asian community has been treated elsewhere. And last but not least, the acknowledgement of longtime residents and former council member Frank Correll. There was an idea to come up with bricks that would bear the names of people that have been big contributors over the years, over the decades to our beloved Martin's Additions. And I guess that's all for now. We have things planned for everyone going forward. My time is up. I thank you for yours.
Thanks very much, Keith. It did, I was in attendance at the meeting, and it does seem like everyone is very excited for things to get back to normal, and I'm sure they will soon, as you said, with the fall film, if not before. So thank you for all you're doing.
Yes, and Susan, I just want to add as liaison, I just wanted to first of all acknowledge, Sally and Renee and everyone who joined us. I see a lot of friendly faces on tonight's call that was there, and it was just a really well-run discussion that felt more like a working group, and everyone was sort of, there contributing, and the ideas were flowing. And quite frankly, it's a lot about how I had envisioned being able to participate with the committee, when I first joined the council. So I just want to thank Keith and everyone who joined. It was really a breath of fresh air. And even though we may not be able to do things immediately because of safety reasons, it gave us, I think, a lot of hope and a lot of great things to look forward to. So with that, I'll turn it back over. Thank you all.
Okay, great. So now I think we're ready for the election committee.
Just 1 second before we do that. Arthur, just so you know, I have Arthur on the phone. So, Arthur, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm restarting my computer. We should be with you in 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, just letting you know, and that he'll be back in a second. And then you also want to say your vote for the minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay, so just so that it's on the record, and I'll see you back in a second. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Leave me here till I come back online.
Yep, we'll do. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
So does he want us to proceed with the?
Yeah, he's gonna.
Committee?
Oh, sorry. Yes, he's just gonna be on the phone for this time.
So is either George, Tiffany,
Yeah,
Rosanna?
Susan, it's Tiffany, Cisna, and
Okay.
George is also on the line.
Great.
So I think it might help if we can, Niles, are you able to screen share? So just to remind people of what we did last year, I actually had taken a picture of my ballot packet that arrived. So you'll see the envelopes. Niles, is that what you're pulling up?
Sorry,
You'll
you
see
yeah, hang on one
the
second.
affidavit that had to be signed last year, the names that you fill out your name, there was a date, there was a signature line. So just for folks to know, the ballot packets that are going to arrive this year are going to look very, very, very similar to what was received last year. And just like last year, they will also include instructions.
Yeah, let me just show.
So I don't know.
Yeah, hang
Niles,
on one
how's
second.
that going?
Just give me 1 second. So envelopes. So yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Oop, no, that's this year's. I will make it. So that's
Well, why don't you?
Plan is frozen, it looks like.
okay. Hang on 1 second. I am going to
Okay.
just
Well,
continue
I'm
talking.
only seeing
hopefully
the
the
2020 plan.
Right.
Okay.
And I'll switch it in just a second, okay? I'll stop sharing in just a sec. I'm going to stop
Let's
sharing for
see.
just a second. Okay.
Niles, no luck.
No, just give me 1 more second. Just continue talking and I'll get it up for you.
He's on mute.
Oh. Thank you. Just give me 1 second and I'm switching it over to the 2020 stuff. So continue
Okay.
talking.
Okay. So, well, I don't want to go too much further just because I think this will help with answering some of the questions that came up. As far as the election plan, and I'm looking at what is on the website, things like issuing a report are included in the election plan. It's on page 3 of 4. It says the committee will announce the results of the report as soon as practicable. We anticipate doing this before Memorial Day. Questions about signatures have been asked in the past and answered. We're not comparing a signature to another signature. The affidavit needs to be signed, so you're swearing to you are the undersigned voter and attest that you are the qualified voter in Martin's Additions according to the charter. So Niles has got last year's folder or return envelope up. This year's will look very similar. It'll have a different date on it, 2020 election. And then, so I'm hopeful, again, if we can see the rest of it, Niles, there you go.
Well, yeah. Sorry.
What about the ones from last year that I sent you via email today?
Yo, you mean your pictures? Yeah, I'll share you that. Yeah.
The pictures.
Yeah. Just give me 1 second.
So we are using Electech through a competitive process this year. They are very familiar with the Village of Martin's Additions. We are, since we're not at the beginning of a pandemic, we actually have about 2 more weeks this year. We're about 2 weeks ahead of where folks were last year. So yes, you can see that's the envelope, the ballot packet that will look similar this year. It should have some color on it just to make it stand out some more. And then Niles, can you go to the actual ballot and instructions pages?
Sure. Just give me 1 second.
And then again, just about some of the questions that came up earlier, there were approximately 601 ballot packages that were mailed last year, approximately 600. About 300 of those were returned and deemed valid. So it seems like Martin's Additions residents got, a pretty good footing under them last year. And since things will be so similar this year, we're anticipating great responses as well. So we'll try and get the last photo up.
Yeah.
Talking about.
Yep. Hang on. I'm just trying to find. Was it in that same thing? Because I don't see the other picture. Hang on 1 second. Why is it being so weird? Technology is always fun, people. Let me try it from here.
Tiffany, while he's trying to, do you know how many of those, with the 300 odd
Here they are.
disavowed last year?
I'm sorry, say that again.
You said approximately 300 ballots were returned last year. Of that 300, how many ballots were disallowed?
So I'm actually looking at the committee report from last year, and it doesn't look like any. It says no ballots were disqualified this year. So folks were able to follow the directions and the ballots were accepted. So Niles has now got up. You'll see this is the backs of everything that was received last year. But here you can see the envelope with the in the bottom right-hand corner. The attestation is the same. The lines are the same that people had to fill out. And then Niles, and then this is the front. Thanks, Niles. So again, on the far left-hand side, you see the ballot package envelope that came in, the instructions, the ballot itself, which this year we have checked and rechecked that the names will be rotated on the ballots. You'll get a ballot secrecy envelope. Last year was called a ballot privacy envelope. That you will put your marked ballot in. It will go into the envelope with the posted paid and pre-addressed envelope, just like it did last year, and then be sent back to the vendor. Again, same vendor, Electech. We've got about 2 more weeks this year in the process than we did last year. So hopefully that helps with some of the confusion. Again, that attestation is the same. The lines that need to be filled out are on the return envelope are the same. So let's talk a little bit about this year. This year, we are expecting ballots to be in the mail, as we said, this week, tomorrow at the latest. We are using the same contractor, Electech. So again, folks should be familiar with the packets they received last year. And they will have specific instructions about how to fill out the ballot, what envelope to put it in, and what to mail back. Again, we've got more lead time this year than we did last year. One of the questions that came up earlier was about May 6th versus May 13th versus May 20th. On page 2 of 4 for this year's election plan, May 6th is that the last, by 5 p.m., any qualified voter's name must be on the voter roll. And similar to last year, why is that? Well, we have to have a date final that people have to get their names on the voter roll in order for us to have the vendor mail them a ballot and for them to mail their ballot back to the vendor. So last year, this date may have been, I don't know, everything was
I believe
like a day off.
it was May 7th, I think, last year.
Yeah, looks like May 7th last year, so it's May 6th this year. Again, similar to last year, we have, the election day or the postmark by date of May 13th, which is 1 week after, just like last year. This year is 1 week after that. You must have your name on the voter roll date. So May 13th this year is the postmark. We do know that the post office does not always postmark mail. So that's why there's the ballot must be received by the provider by May 20th. 5 p.m. May 20th, the vendor will be at the P.O. box receiving or taking the last ballots that were there. The committee anticipates, as I said, a little bit further down on page 3 of 4, we anticipate counting and getting the report out, similar to reports that have been done in the past, to voters before Memorial Day. So
hopefully that clears up some of just what was done last year, how similar things will be this year. As far as next things in their election process, here, Niles has got up just for those who are looking. This is what it should look like, obviously with someone's name, the qualified voter's name in the middle of the envelope this year. So next on Tuesday, April the 20th at 7:30 p.m., we'll have the candidate forum. That's going to be held via Zoom. Login information for that will be included in this Friday's wrap up, and then a reminder will be sent out next week. So similar to the rhythm people are accustomed to for council meetings, we'll be in that rhythm for the candidate forum. Just a reminder, if qualified voters want to email questions for consideration to the committee in advance, they may do so by April the 18th at 5 p.m. The committee's email is vmaelections@martinseditions.org. You do not have to, qualified voters do not have to submit their questions in writing in advance. If they choose to try to ask them during the meeting, obviously we'll have some time restraints, similar to what has been done for all of the candidate forums in the past. So after that, we just wanted to touch on the note that was sent out today. Yes, we did send out a note to clear up some misinformation, information that had been disseminated to the village about the election process. It was not sent by the committee. And so I'll go over that for those who just haven't had a chance to read it yet. You don't have to mail your ballot back immediately upon receipt. So say you get your ballot on Monday or Tuesday and you want to hear the candidate forum on Tuesday night. There's time, if you listen to the candidate forum on Tuesday night and mark your ballot and drop it in the mail on Wednesday, that's about a full month. That is April the 21st. That's about a full month before our must be received by date. So that was one thing. And then the other thing that we corrected in the email today, or tried to dispel any misinformation or confusion, was about how one would fill out the affidavit on the back of the envelope that goes back to the vendor. And again, we will have instructions in each qualified voter's envelope very similar to last year's that tell qualified voters step by step what they need to do. We also hope to be using photos in some of our future communications, like the one that you're seeing on the screen now. I guess it's not a photo, it's an image. So that folks know what to expect as the mail comes. George, if you're still there and I missed something, please feel free to add.
Yeah, nothing really to add other than just, as you mentioned, the candidate forum next week. We hope we can get some, or we hope that everyone who's interested will be able to dial in. And if, again, as Tiffany mentioned, if you have questions that you would like to provide in advance, please, make sure you get those emailed in by 5 o'clock on the 8th.
Thanks, George. Okay, so Susan, I don't know if you want to accept the committee report or if you want us to hang on to try and field some questions. Again, I think a lot of this becomes clearer when people receive their ballot packages with the instructions in them.
I would like to accept the committee report. I did have a question. As I recall, there were more. You said that there were no ballots spoiled in the 2020 election. Is that right?
According to the report that I read,
and I seem to remember that there were some in the previous year's election. So if that's the case, that would mean that mail-in was actually more successful, that people were able to comply with the instructions last year, even better than in person, which is a great recommendation for mail-in voting.
Tiffany and George, this is Jeff Blander here. I want to thank you so much for all the work of the committee. I know, quite frankly, it's thankless, and most of the time when you get emails or other things, it's probably because there's a complaint or something. So I just want to start out like that. The other thing I just want to put out there, and Niles, I just want to, there was a really thoughtful discussion at the last council meeting on 2 issues, and I think it kind of seems to be spilling over. And I don't know if we can talk more to it, or we could put it to bed, or whatever it is. But I think the first is around the signature and the voter roll. And I think we all recognize that apparently there were no rejected ballots because of the signature. And I think that it was sort of made clear that, and we had a nice friendly discussion that essentially whatever the envelope says when it's mailed, that is indicative of what is probably on the voter roll, and that folks should just return that. And
Right.
I think that was sort of the confusion of, well, we don't have the voter roll, how do we know? But I think that clarified it, and I think that took a lot of the air pressure out. Right. And recognizing that no one was rejected because of their signature, and I thought right. That was awesome. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, which again is a little bit of a quicksand, and there's really no way to really get around it, is that there are dates out there of where you set these guardrails, which again, we commend the committee for doing so, but we recognized in COVID, even if, and as things are getting, restrictions are being lifted and things, the U.S. Postal Service still has had their challenges. So I think last meeting, we said, when you get your ballots, it's reasonable to try and mail those in as soon as possible. So yeah, I just want to put that out there, that I don't think that there's been any conflicting guidance, but I believe that in the last discussion, we had some of these in between the lines of what the signature was on the voter roll and then on the envelope. Yeah. And it wasn't really it was a nothing burger because no one was rejected, and it's kind of out there. And then with the mailing in the ballots, I agree. I've seen on the unofficial listserv, there have been statements about how they support certain candidates. And, I personally think that in respect of all 6 candidates, we should all attend, make an effort to go to the forum next week and hear ideas and hear what folks have to say, and not just mail in a ballot right away. I think that's the respectful thing, because for someone who recently went through this experience, it takes a lot to get out there. It takes a lot to put yourself out there. And I hope that people do wait and not just mail in their ballots. So I'll just put it there. Niles, was there anything there? I think we're aligned. And Tiffany and George, again, I hope we're aligned. But again, saying thank you for all your work and effort.
And I want to just add something kind of to that statement. So yes, so what it is looking at what you get on that envelope is what's on the voter roll. And if the easiest thing, if you're concerned about it, is just trying to match what's on the envelope. That's just sort of a good rule of thumb when filling it out. The second thing related to the post office, Matt at Electech, our vendor, we had a good discussion today about they use a post office that is used to doing these bulk mailings, that he's a very good relationship, and that he talks to frequently the postmaster there. So working it through their end, they are working all the angles there. And we have, for both the return envelope and the original envelope, what's sent to the voters and returned, will have tracking this year, which last year we had tracking only one way, but this year we have it both ways, and we've ensured that. So I just wanted to put that out there as another thing that we can track and deal with in terms of making sure if there's any issues that come up. Also, I just wanted to just mention that we have the information on the website, and we can update that if when we have more guidance. We'll add the pictures of the envelope, that kind of thing, so that people know what to look for, and I think that might be a good way forward as well. So.
Thanks, Niles. And my last comment, I just want to say, recognizing Peter Kahn and Susan Kahn, that their combined IQ, I feel that I scratch the surface of things, and so I probably very, very understated some of the things they mentioned, but I was just covering the big ticket issues that seem to come up. So Peter and Susan Kahn, I apologize if I misrepresented your concerns.
Okay, so I think, okay, Susan Kahn?
Oh, yes. It's still unclear to me. The ballot and the envelope might be similar from last year to this year, but the election guidelines are very different. And it's unclear to me if you sign your name this year, first, I don't know if, maybe I could just ask Tiffany directly. Do you need to sign your first and last name? Do you need to print your first and last name? Do you need to write the number of your house and the street name? And do you need to write the date? And if any of those four things are not written, or are difficult to read, will it be an invalidated ballot? I'm kind of wondering about that. Thanks.
Can I address, before Tiffany says, can I address the question of the difference in rules? So after our conversation this morning, Susan, I realized that on the website, the election plan, or where the election plan was actually just the ordinance and resolution. So I have updated the website with what was the election plan last year, which was very similar to this year's plan. And I apologize for that error. I don't know how exactly that happened, but I can send you what last year's plan was so that you can look at it as well. So that's one statement. And we can talk further if you want to know about that. I didn't realize that until after we talked, so thank you for that conversation. And then Tiffany, if you want to go ahead.
Okay, so my understanding from documents from last year's committee, as well as the legal counsel, is that our attorney advised the committee that they had to review every envelope and make decisions on a case-by-case basis as to whether or not they met the requirements in the plan. And so we anticipate doing the same thing that the committee did last year.
May I speak?
And I may be able to help clarify that one point as well.
Yeah, that doesn't answer Susan's question at all. She asked some very specific questions. Why cannot the committee address those questions specifically?
So it might help. I'm looking at last year's plan and this year's plan. The last year's plan says, voters shall write their full legal name and address on the issued return envelope and sign the affirmation. This year's plan says the same thing, but adds a parenthetical, i.e. house number and street name of qualifying address in the village. So I can't speak for the election committee, but I imagine that parenthetical was not added to change the rule, but added to clarify the existing rule, because perhaps it was unclear to some folks last year. What address do you mean? Should we sign the address where we're voting from, or should we sign the address on the voter registry? Sign the address, write the address that's on the voter registry. Yeah, that's what's clarified by that parenthetical. But the rule isn't changing from last year. So write your full legal name and address.
Well, that still doesn't answer Susan's questions.
If I could,
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question, Susan?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The question was, the procedures last year specifically said a signature is required, but ballot envelopes will not be rejected due to any errors or variations on the form, because there was a control number on them that was another way to check them. So even though yes, they are required, but you have leeway locally in the village to adjust these things. And as far as I know, if a name, a signature, an address, or a date is not on there, you are allowed to accept the vote. It can be okay ballot. And what you're saying now, what is written now is that it would not be. And so there is a discrepancy. We need to know. It's a very specific question. If you do not write your first and last name, if you do not sign your first and last name, if you do not write your house number and street name and or the date, if you do not write any of those, will your ballot be rejected and considered, invalidated?
So again, I'm gonna say this, and I'm not an attorney, but I've heard the council from last year. This year's election plan on page 3 of 4 also includes that there will be a control number, same language as last year. The attorney advised the committee from last year that any decisions had to be made on a case-by-case basis. So, Larry, I'm not trying to not answer Susan's question. I'm trying to follow the legal counsel as given to the committee. We will have to look at the ballots that are received and make a decision at that time based off of all the information that we have, whether or not that ballot can be accepted. And I want everybody to keep in mind, we're talking about the ballot return envelope. We're not talking about the ballot itself. The decision about whether or not to accept this ballot that was mailed back is made before that envelope is even opened.
And Tiffany, when you say we will review, could you clarify that? Because I had thought the election service providers are going to actually be receiving these envelopes and conducting that review.
Go ahead, Niles.
So what happened last year is that the election service provider reviewed all of them, looked at them and said, okay, this all matches, and then goes on. Any questions they had, right, were then sent to the committee for their adjudication. So like so if something was not right, was deemed to be too difficult and things like that. And there were only a handful of ballots last year that had to be looked at. I think it was 6. Envelopes that needed to be looked at. I think there were 6. And all of them, as Tiffany mentioned before, were accepted. So it's a small number that were actually even adjudicated last year.
And I'm looking again at the rules from last year and this year, and the election service provider is supposed to review each envelope for 7 things, and those 7 things aren't changing this year. So I'm not sure.
Right. So
I apologize, but I don't understand the question, I guess. Could you point to me in the rules where the change has been made from last year to this year?
This is where it goes back to, I think, the confusion from a mistake on the website. So what Peter and Susan are looking at was the procedures that were done before the village decided to go with a vote by mail election. Because what I realized today, as I said, after talking with Susan, I realized.
Not to interrupt,
yeah.
Jimmy, just to clarify, the confusion is about last year's document, not what was on the website for this year.
Correct, last year's document. So what I put in the chat so that people can see is the emergency plan from last year, and I'll put the emergency plan, or not the emergency plan, the election plan for this year also in the chat so that people can look at it. But I think some of the confusion is looking at it was because of an error on the website, which I only noticed today, so I apologize for that. But that way you can kind of see. But as I said, last year the provider looked at it first, and then if there were any issues that they found, they were adjudicated by the election committee.
So may I ask a question? I'm sorry. So when the rules of the plan for last year says a signature is required, but ballot envelopes will not be rejected due to any voter errors or variations on the form, I would assume that is the reason that no ballots were sent back, or that very few ballots were sent back for adjudication, because the rules have explicitly said that ballot envelopes will not be rejected due to any voter error or variation. And similarly, when those that were sent back were read by the committee, they had already decided that as long as the control number matched their pre-existing list, virtually anything was okay. And, you know, as a result, I think, you know, I think the fact that that's missing this year suggests that variations or errors will indeed be treated differently, probably by the, I assume by the contractor and possibly by the committee as well. The contractor, because he's trying to follow, they're trying to follow the rules, and you know, I don't know how the committee will respond.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So
Peter,
Tiffany,
just
wait a minute. I think that's something Tiffany needs to answer, Niles.
right. I just wanted to address one thing, which is to say because he asked about the contractor or referenced the contractor. So I just wanted to say the language that you were referring to, right, was not in the emergency plan that was approved at the April 16th meeting. What I put in the link, there's two links to it. The first one is the 2020 plan. The vendor never saw the language that you're referring to. They followed the emergency plan, which is very similar to this year's plan. So in terms of their review, the variation in all of that was not what they were looking at, because they did not, that was not what applied. I just want to make that clear, you know, as a point of reference. So
Niles, can you clarify in what document does that verbiage appear?
So the verbiage that appears is the language that was originally approved by the council in February of 2020, before the pandemic started. That was based on previous year documents. So if you go on the election page here and you click on the what was adopted in February, that I think is of 2020. I believe that is where that language might appear. So I just want to clarify that because it was related to the contractor. So I'm.
So does that mean that the contractor paid no attention to what was on the affidavit?
No, it means that they looked at the affidavit and they said, "Does this match the voter roll? Does the ballot control numbers match? If it does, if all of that was correct, you know, if all of that matched, they went ahead and processed it. The election committee didn't even look at that. So they were checking as in the plan. If you look on the 2020 emergency plan, which I put in the link, it has those things that the election provider is supposed to look for, and they checked those things. And then if there were ever, so it's on page 3 of the 2020 emergency plan, it says the village election service provider will review each return ballot envelope for the following to ensure a proper ballot is enclosed. That the ballot return envelope was properly completed. That the ballot return envelope is unopened. That the control number on the ballot matches the control number assigned to the voter by the election service provider. That the person who signed the envelope is the person who has issued the ballot. That the person who voted the ballot is a qualified voter in the village, basically looking at the voter roll. That the ballot envelope had not been canceled or spoiled. That the ballot envelope is postmarked no later than May 15th, 2020, and or is received by May 22nd, 2020. So that's what they looked at. And then there was one additional question that was asked, or specifically that was asked last year, about if two people in the same household switched ballots. And what was the decision of last year's election committee, and what was written into their procedures for the vote counting, was that if you lived in the same household, but you switched your ballot envelope, so you signed the wrong one, basically, that would still count. And so, therefore, there was, I believe, one ballot that fit that, and so therefore, or two ballots, I should say. There's one set, you know, for lack of a better term. And so, what the vendor did is they showed them to the election committee, and the election committee adjudicated it. So that just that clarifying language, I think, is just to help with the process. Okay.
Okay, I'm really concerned about the issue of the name of the voter being known to the committee at the time that the ballot envelope is being adjudicated. And to me, this represents a bit of a threat to the idea of the secret ballot. I'm not saying that there necessarily could be bias, but it's not inconceivable that there might be bias. And knowing who the voter is, I think represents, it undermines the secrecy of the ballot, and it undermines the credibility of the voting process.
Peter, let me interrupt there. How else can you review an envelope except by looking at it? You can't do it by touch.
Well, so that's why I'm suggesting that the I forget what you call them, the observers be present at the review of the envelopes. To me, that seems like it reduces the risk of the credibility. Now, I understand. I've been told by someone that state law requires that this information be printed on the ballot, but on the envelope. But I'm not sure that that's true. But it seems to me that with the control number being present, that's really all that's required. You know that the ballot is valid, or that the envelope is valid, because you have a control number that matches a name on the list. And there really isn't any complication to that. This whole business about names and addresses legibly printed and then signed, I think does raise questions of credibility. Well, I'll just leave it there. Any thoughts on that?
Tiffany?
So, Peter, I think it's the question about observers is something the committee will take a look at after the forum. Last year, it's my understanding observers didn't come in until after the ballots were reviewed.
The envelopes were reviewed.
The envelope, yes, I should say that correct. Thank you, Niles.
Mm-hmm.
So after the return envelopes were reviewed, then the observers were able to join under last year's process. I'm not going to speak for my committee because we're a committee of 3, but off the top of my head right now, I don't think I would object to observers joining for the review process. But again, I would want to, we're going to tackle our review process after we do the candidate forum. And like we have for other things, we'll be, starting with how did this go last year and what were lessons learned from last year.
Right. And the other thing, that I expressed in my earlier statement, and I appreciate that, Tiffany, I really do, is the question, in this report, I assume that the report will, as last year, report the total number of ballot envelopes received, the number that have been disqualified, and the reasons for the disqualification, along with the number of valid votes for each candidate, so that we have a clear picture of that. Would that be the case?
Peter, I think that's a reasonable assumption, but we haven't written the report yet. But given the reports from the previous years, that information or information similar has been included in all of them.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that it will be in this one.
Susan, I have a question for Tiffany. May I?
Sorry, but really quick. I just wanted to answer one other thing, a point that Peter raised about the secret envelopes. The other reason why it becomes less of a problem is because the election vendor, and the ballot packet does include that secret envelope within the envelope to make sure that we are handling the reviews without any possible way of seeing what is actually included in the ballot. And that's why we have the second envelope that goes within the additional envelope to make sure that the
Well, we're a small
ballots
community.
remain secret, so that by the time ballots are actually being opened and looked at, they are not in any way related to or potentially to be linked to someone's name.
Yeah, I think, we're a small community, and the views of many of us are, have been publicly stated in forums just like this. And, so knowing the name may, give some suggestion as to what's actually inside the envelope. And I guess that's the nature of the concern. I think, if it were a large, tens of thousands of people, as in, a state election, it's a different story, perhaps. But I think in a tiny community like this, there may be reason for further safeguards.
So how are the observers going to be selected?
The candidates.
Larry,
Sorry. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Larry, you will get to select your observer. In the past, some candidates themselves have been their observers. I'm not certain if candidates have ever sent someone else in as an observer.
Because if there's I think Susan Kahn and Peter Kahn would be two fantastic observers.
Okay, so for the council, are we, I hope that we have answered questions. George?
Tiffany, this is Jeff. I think you have. I just wanted to, Susan Kahn, I still was uncertain. Was your question answered about the information and whether a ballot would be rejected if it's not filled in? I think a discussion ensued about last year's law policy, this year's policy. I got kind of lost. So I just, could someone clarify that? Do we still, the control number is there? If someone doesn't fill out all the information, that isn't going to be something rejected. I wasn't sure. Was that clearly stated in answering Susan's question? Over.
So my understanding, and Ron can add here, is that decision has to be made on a case-by-case basis at the time when the envelopes are there. So does the control number match? Did they sign? If I write Jeff Blander on mine, the answer should be no. I'm going to say that for my own ballot. I'm not going to.
Tiffany, what if you write Jeff Blander illegibly?
Well, signatures aren't going to be compared to anything else. Okay. We're looking just at their sign, right? You're attesting to the affidavit. So I think, again, following the model from last year, we will take all of the information that's available into account for hopefully the very few that the committee even has to review. Hopefully it's all, handled by the vendor. If we can get down to 6 from almost 300, that seems like a pretty good number to me. Then we will follow the council from last year to review them on a case-by-case basis with all of the information that's available to us at that time.
And I would just add, as a practical matter, the rules aren't changing. The instructions to the election service provider are not changing. And if the election service provider was able to read all the names last year, I would anticipate they'll be able to read all the names this year. So, to comment on what Tiffany said about reviewing things on a case-by-case basis, that's something we just have to say, because we can't guarantee with a statement right now that there'll be bright line rules that may change based on facts and circumstances, how the rule is interpreted. However, I'm hoping there's not going to be an issue here, because again, the election service provider is supposed to review that the person who signed the envelope is the person who was issued the ballot. That's the same as it was last year. And the election service provider didn't have any issue doing that last year, and I don't anticipate any issue this year.
can I make one quick point? When the election procedures were up before the council for approval, I had suggested that observers, anyone could be an observer, any resident could be an observer. Muted, silent, a silent observer. There were no objections to it, I believe, at that point. Could we still make such a change, and would everybody, the fellow members of the council, accept that? And is there any reason why that should not be appropriate?
Oh, sorry to interrupt, Arthur. I believe that is in the rules this year. I think that was in addition to the rules.
Okay, good. So anybody can be an observer.
Yes, yeah, the candidate, let me find the exact statement. So this year's rules say candidates or their representatives, only one per candidate, may observe the tallying, review, and certification process. That's on bottom of page 3.
But does that allow anybody?
Yes, because a candidate can choose anybody they want as their representative.
More than one?
No, just one. Each candidate chooses one.
I'm suggesting any resident should be able to be.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
Yeah. Is there election committee, council members, is there any objection to that?
My only thought would be we'd want to make sure that people actually mute their screens.
Well, that could be done by the
Yeah. I can,
could be a little crazy otherwise.
I can deal with that. And if you want to be bored for the most part, because it's just watching a machine go.
Exactly.
Most of the
I was
time
there.
it's just
Arthur and I
watching
were
the
there
machine
last year, and it was not exactly riveting.
But it's a good opportunity.
It does allow anyone to watch the process.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask another question?
Niles, before they run the ballots through the machine, won't they hold the ballot up so that everybody can see the name?
So what they do is so if there are any questions with the envelope, the Electech, our vendor, will bring them, they'll show them to the committee so that they can understand what potential issue is, and then they can adjudicate it, and then they can do it that way. And then after that, they start the machine, and then about an hour and a half later of watching the machine go, they have a count, and if they have any ballots that need to be adjudicated, they look at the ballots then as well. All right?
Can I ask another question? So I'm curious about what the role of the observer is. I mean, so are they intended to sit there silently and watch what the committee does? Or do they have any larger role, for example, if they believe that the committee has acted inappropriately?
So Peter, this is Tiffany again. We're going to take a look at this for this year's committee after the forum. Last year's committee gave instructions to the candidates or their representatives. My understanding from the documents was that they were on mute and that they did not speak throughout the counting process. I have a procedural question for Ron that I'm not asking him to answer now, but it will come up in our discussion of procedures for this year. But okay, so how does someone raise an objection or a question and when? So that kind of question is on my mind, and George and Anna, I know, are mulling over similar things, which again we'll have a discussion about after the forum.
Sure. So I would want to have a conversation with Electech to see how they handle objections when we're dealing with a Zoom or other remote conference. And to answer Peter's question, I think the main role of the observer is to raise challenges on behalf of their candidate if they witness something that's improper.
Right.
And I don't know a better way of doing it. Maybe it's something we have to look into, but with respect to the names, I think a primary reason you want the observer to see the names so that the observer can verify that that's a qualified voter who has submitted a ballot. But we'll have to ask Electech how they would recommend processing an objection that's made during that observation. Assumedly, that ballot would probably be provisionally tallied and set aside for the election judges to then review afterwards, but we can.
Is there any procedure in the village for dealing with objections raised by observers?
No, that's not detailed in the rules currently.
And I had an initial conversation with Matt from Electech about this. He didn't give specifics then, but he did say that he also would want to have a conversation with you, Ron, so we can set up that call, as soon as possible. All right.
Okay.
So, I guess I would just ask that the results of that be made public.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Agreed. Okay, council, so for George and I, did you guys have anything else, or are you good with the report for tonight?
I think we are good for the report. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your endurance and patience and thoroughness of your responses.
Great, happy to help. Thank you, guys.
Look forward to Tuesday.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so next we have the inaugural report, I think, of the administrative task force, the administrative meeting of the task force, the safety task force. Is that right, Niles?
Yes.
Are they ready?
I know Mark was not able to make it. Amanda, do you want to do a quick summation of what happened in the meeting? Otherwise, I can.
If you don't mind giving it, that would be wonderful.
Perfect. Okay. On Monday, the Public Safety Task Force had an administrative meeting to set up the task force. This included picking a chair in Mark Schaefer and a vice chair, which is Amanda, who you just heard. And the task force also started to divide up its work into sort of three working groups, one on public safety, one on public health, and one on sort of survey questions and things like that. The task force is, one of the first things is to get community, or one of the things that they're considering is how best to get community input, and sort of discuss where we are and how we're going to go through. Also, there is a email for the public safety task force. It's public safety task force, at martinseditions.org, and that will be something that residents can submit if they have ideas for the task force or things like that. They're planning on doing their first open meeting on Monday, April 26th. I believe the time that was agreed to was 8 p.m. So we can look forward to that, and we'll have that on the calendar very shortly. I got a thumbs up from Amanda, so I was right there. And I think those were the main topics that were discussed, and sort of getting everybody used to their roles. And they look forward, and I was a part of it, to the first public meeting. All right.
Okay. So next.
I was just going to mention, and Arthur, I wasn't sure if you wanted to add, but I know Amanda's here, but really a wonderful group. And I think that this committee, or task force, is going to have really important impact both in the near term as we really look to emerge from COVID and some things related to that in our community, but also some of these intermediate and longer term issues that have been important to all of us. So really excited, very thoughtful, and just really thanking not only Amanda, who's here, and Arthur and Ron. You gave us a great start off to the orientation, but bravo to everyone, and really looking forward to it. Thanks. Over.
Okay. So next we can discuss
Doug's report.
Doug, I'm so sorry. Doug Lohmeyer, thank you for waiting.
That's okay. Good evening, everyone. Just a couple things to go over my report. For 3506 Bradley Lane, the demolition building permit application had been submitted a while ago. As of yesterday, the county had not approved those plans, so that project is still on hold. For 7220 Delfield Street, they submitted an application for demolition of an existing building permit. As of we heard, I believe today, that the county has approved the plans, so the applicant will be submitting stamped copies of the county plans for our final review. At 3515 Raymond Street, an application was submitted to remove the existing house and construct a new house. That work is underway now. At 7200 Summit Avenue, again, just a reminder that the variance will expire on January 16th.
July.
And the applicant needs to, July 16th, yes. And the applicant by the code must submit a building permit application before that expires. And finally, a couple of years ago, Tiffany, when she was chair, submitted a letter to the state highway regarding drainage problems along Brookville Road and safety features at Bradley and Taylor Street for pedestrians. The state has come out and made some improvements to the drainage at a couple of the intersections, but they have not addressed the comments in Tiffany's letter regarding the safety at Bradley and Taylor. So we're proposing sending another letter out to the state, asking them for follow-up on that, and also we're asking them to look into what improvements they may be able to do for the sidewalk along Brookville Road for pedestrians. That letter should be going out shortly, and that concludes my report.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, so now the discussion of and possible intro of an ordinance to clarify the intent of the garage door width requirement in the building code. And Ron, you were going to pick this one up?
Sure. So with respect to the building project at 7200 Delfield, a permit was issued about a year ago, and the permit was issued allowing a front-loading garage door facing Taylor Street having a width of 16 feet. And the village code provides that a house can only have one front-loading garage and the door can't exceed 10 feet, if it's facing a front lot line. And the building permit administrator, in reviewing the application, found that because the frontage of the house was on Delfield and not Taylor, that requirement did not apply. And I have a different view of the code, or different interpretation of the code, but seeing that the code language is capable of different interpretations, this ordinance is proposed in order to clarify the language and clarify that with respect to corner lots have at least two frontages. Whichever or any front lot line is going to be deemed a frontage for purposes of the one front loading garage and door width limitation. So, looking at the definitions, the current language is unclear. The definition of front lot line is as follows: means the lot line running along the front of the lot, separating it from the street. So use of the word "the" there indicates that there's only one. And so this ordinance would propose to change "the" to "a," and then add another phrase: corner lots have two or more front lot lines, to clarify again that corner lots have two front yards. And then section 7402K would also be similarly clarified to reflect that corner lots are subject to those restrictions with respect to all street frontages. And this ordinance is up for discussion and possible introduction tonight. And if it were to be introduced tonight, it would then be subject to a hearing and public comment at a future council meeting. Happy to answer any questions.
I will move to introduce this tonight, and I want to alert all the English teachers and writing teachers out there. You can use this as the example for your proper choice of words. And the really have a meaning. And
articles have importance.
they have importance indeed. And the wrong choice can lead to ambiguity. And we are correcting this. So correcting the article. So I move to introduce it. And I have no discussion of this.
Does anyone wish to discuss, or can we get a second, please?
This is my 2 cents. I will second it, so there's no drama here, but I did want to just mention, I do hope, even though it probably is considered a nothing burger, because I think this is rectifying, again, something that's important and will mitigate any future anxiety amongst residents, because this did come up because it did bring angst among residents. So I think this is really important to get through. But I'm hoping that when we do have that public forum, it'd be great to do it when it's not the same day that we're going to adopt it, because I don't think, it would just be great if we're going to have an hour or more discussion, we don't try and cram it into one meeting, and that it provides some thoughtful input from residents, because even though it's a nothing burger for us, I think there may just be a lot of folks out there who don't really know a lot about it, and we could take a separate standalone public forum where folks can understand what the issue is, and then again it becomes a nothing burger and it gets approved. So that's it, but I second. Thanks.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. All opposed?
Susan, this is Holly Worthington. I know I'm not supposed to talk in the middle of a meeting, but you all need to know something that would take 60 seconds to comment on this ordinance. May I tell you, or would you prefer to wait till the end?
If it's 60 seconds, go ahead.
I want all of you to know how serious the difference is in this ordinance, because it takes away property value when you have a property that, I'm not rooting for or against it, but it is absolutely a property value takeaway to not allow a corner property to have a 2-car garage. So you've got 2 issues here I'm trying to protect the village here, meaning all of you. You want to be careful about doing something that is that could be construed to be taking value away from a homeowner. And from the aesthetics of it, I'm totally with you. The second point really is just that if this revised ordinance affects the house that's being constructed, you may end up getting sued by the developer too. So I'm just throwing out that for you to consider. I just want you to think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I think we had a 4-0 vote. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right. So now, Arthur, financial matters.
Okay, financial matters. This can be short. Everything looks pretty good. Revenues are coming in as expected. Expenditures are going out less than expected. There was some very eagle-eyed residents pointed out to me today that the code as posted on the website that I have on my computer, or the charter, the village charter, required that property taxes be above a certain minimum, and that we have in the past and are proposing this year a property tax below that minimum. And so it appeared that perhaps for the last 10 years or so we had been violating the charter, and there was a question of what to do about that. Well, it was then pointed out by our equally eagle-eyed council that the charter had been amended in 2007. But for some reason, that amendment was not reflected in the posted charter that I and everybody else had access to. And so it turned out to be not an issue. I do want to thank our eagle-eyed residents for pointing that out. And we are not in violation of the charter. We can have a very low rate, as the comptroller of the state keeps putting out in their state publications, Martin's edition, as the lowest property tax rate of any municipality in the state, $0.005 per 100. Ron, it's dollars, not cents, in the resolution, and we have to change that one word. That another eagle-eyed resident had pointed out. So thank you, eagle-eyed residents. Thank you, Ron. Everything is squared away. We are in good shape.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. Okay, Niles, it's your report time.
Yes. So we've done a few things around the village over the past month. So just let me get it all up. Staple through. So one, obviously, we've talked a lot about the election, and we are working on that process. We chose LecTech as we talked about, which was the vendor last year. So we're going through with that, as Tiffany sort of mentioned. The Public Safety Task Force we talked about as well. Tree work this week we started what was the priority trees, or for lack not priority, the ones that needed the most work, the most immediate work first this week, and we will be subsequently over the next few months dealing with other trees that need work, village trees that need work. If you see a tree in front of your house, somebody else's house that might need attention from the tree, from the village arborist and the tree supervisor, let me know. There's a couple of residents who already reached out about trees. We'll add them and look at them and see what work needs to be done. Also related, we are working on getting up netting on some of the smaller and younger trees. This is from Monty, the tree supervisor, pointed this out, and so we're working on getting netting because of the cicadas that will be coming. So we want to make sure that those that address, and so that the younger and smaller trees do not have adverse effects from that. Landscaping, some of you might have noticed that we've done some work at the garden at the end of Brookville Road in Cummings. This was primarily to deal with issues of erosion. We put in some river rock and some other plantings to try to stabilize the ground there, and at the two village signs as well. And then lastly, Lynn touched on it a little bit before. We are very close to issuing the invitation to bid for the waste and recycling contract. I sent around the draft of that to the council for their review, and if they have any comments or changes. Right now, the bid includes all the services as is, but I know that there had been some feedback from the survey and others around potential changes, and so before I sent it out, I figured that this would be an opportunity for discussion. We are also going to be doing an RFP around street maintenance that will include some of the projects that we've discussed in terms of walkability and things like that, and that will be issued very shortly as well. So we'll have two projects out there to get us going on a couple of the bigger items. So I leave it open to the council for questions.
I would like a quick comment on the chat. There was a statement or comment that we are changing the nature in the ordinance that we just proposed tonight, that we're changing the nature of the definition of a corner lot. That's not correct. I think, Ron, we've always considered a corner lot to have two fronts. It's just that the language was not clear on it. But the interpretation of it has always been this. We are not changing our interpretation. So if whatever the value of your lot was before, it's the same today. It's not going to change.
Yeah, that's correct. The definition is not changing. A variance process is available for those with a corner lot that want to seek approval for a wider garage door. And the ordinance as proposed would not alter the permit approval for 7200 Delfield. It would be consistent with the permit approval.
So your report is concluded,
Okay.
and we are now, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Niles, yes. Okay, so then we are now ready to entertain more resident comments.
Oh, I'm sorry. It wouldn't be consistent with the permit approval, but it would not overturn the permit approval. My apologies.
What does that mean?
So, because the permit's already been issued, it's not going to be revoked. The code is clarified. So the permit approval, I guess you could say, is consistent with the prior interpretation of the code, but the code will now be clarified for.
So you mean that the code, the way it's worded, this is important for everyone on this call. I know it sounds like it's splitting hairs, but honestly, this is really important, because if you're saying, Ron, that this change in wording to comply with the intention of the code and I was involved in all those setbacks and rules that we had here, studied them carefully. If you, and it's my business, as most of you know, but it's very important that you not say, I mean, I think it's important that we not take the position that, well, we meant it to say that, and we've always interpreted it that way. Therefore, if we're rejecting this two-car garage, it's because we always interpret it that way, when in fact, the language we have doesn't read that way. You follow?
Yeah, I follow you. So the ordinance will not impact that existing permit at 7200 Delfield. That permit will continue to be valid.
Okay, then I just want to point out that since it's public annoying people like me comment time, is that for people who do want to have a two-car garage facing the front, and there are houses in our village that do have that, not very many, but there are, not allowing someone to do that is taking away a property right. I'm not sitting here lobbying for two-car garages in our village. I'm a tree lover, so I'd rather have a yard. But I can tell you that there will be people that will feel that this change would take away rights. So this really needs to be have a public forum for this and a really big conversation. I know that sounds minor, but it's not minor in real estate, I'm telling you. I'm just trying to help. Thank you.
It's not taking away rights. It's not changing anything that exists today. This has been in the building code since there was a building code.
No, not if then you wouldn't need to change anything if it's been there.
Yeah.
Arthur, you wouldn't need to change it if it was already there. It's not already there. It's just that you may have been interpreting it that way before, but the way it's clearly read, the way it exists now, it would allow a two-car garage on the side street, a side corner, and not the front corner. And you are changing it. You may be saying we interpreted it that way all along, but that's not. This is kind of the same conversation we were having about the election committee, which is, well, last year here's how we did it, even though we have this in writing. And so people start wondering, well, if it's not in writing, what does it really mean? This is a change. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to do an ordinance. It is a change.
Clarification.
Well, then don't bother if it's not worth it. So it's really important. You know what I mean. I'm not trying to fuss with you. I'm just trying to say, please have a public forum on this, because there will be residents that will really care about this. And when we did all those setbacks, we had a lot of public forums on it, and everyone chipped in, and we didn't have a lot of resistance from the community because there was a lot of understanding. And we really need to communicate about this and make sure the villagers know about it. I'm just trying to be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for Niles.
Yes.
Actually, for the council. I'm looking at the calendar, and I don't see, not that I've spent a year cleaning the house, but I'm in desperate need of shredding.
Yes. Oh, yes. Sorry. I forgot to mention this. So the shred event is going to be in June. I'm just settling on the date. We do it in concert with the other two villages, so Section 3 and Section 5. We just need to coordinate our schedules. But what I am anticipating is similar to what we did last year, which would be the second or third Saturday in June, which is either the 12th or the 19th. And I can announce that. I was going to finalize it and announce it at the next meeting, but that's what I'm thinking right now.
All right, great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Susan Kahn?
Just a small thing. It goes back to the Public Safety Committee or task force. I just wanted to make sure that they keep on their radar getting a crosswalk at Bradley and Brookville. We've needed it for a really long time. Just a crosswalk and or stop signs.
Yeah.
And I know it's more gnarly because it involves working with the state, but there are state delegates who have offered to us to help us. So, and I think it's still worth it to keep working on it. Thank you.
And Susan, just to that point, that's part of what's in with the letter that Doug referred to the state. That's one of the issues that we're referencing there. So we are on top of that. So thank you, Doug.
And I would just say really quickly to that, even though it's only been administrative, there was a very strong discussion from the outset that there would be, working with the workability task force as well, where this also comes in. So there seems to be some really good collaboration, and hopefully there'll be some movement on this. Thanks.
Amanda, is Amanda's hand up, or is that from a previous?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to second what Holly was saying. I think it would be valuable to have a potentially standalone forum on the ordinance issue. My view on this is that there's clearly cases, very recent cases that have been approved where this was allowable in the very recent past. And so the proposed updates do seem to be a substantive change in my opinion. And given that, I think it's important that we hear from the community and that everyone has a lot of time to consider this and time to speak to the council about their opinions.
Thank you.
Excellent.
I think it would actually be very helpful to know which specific properties you're referring to as well. So if you could maybe get in touch with Niles and let him know.
I was referring to the recently approved permit.
That would be great.
Right. Yeah. I understand what you're saying, Amanda. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I think there's one more hand. I think Tiffany has her hand.
Yes, Tiffany Cisna, Bradley Lane. So about the tree covering pre-cicada,
Yes.
is that for village trees in the right-of-way only, or is Mulherron planning to do that for the trees that were just planted in the tree planting program?
So that's a good question. The original idea was to do it for village trees, since the maintenance of the tree program trees is usually the resident. So we can that might be a discussion that the council can have on that as well, and we can see about how we deal with the maintenance of the trees that the village planted. Okay.
Okay, great, thanks. And then my second, Arthur, I'm very familiar with the discussion and possible introduction and the layover timeframes. I would just offer that from the few minutes that I heard discussions about garage, the difference here is how we would be treating a corner lot versus how we treat other lots when it comes to whether or not they can have a 2-car garage.
Front facing.
And I know that the front loading question has been answered for years. But the issue is now for the folks who are on that corner, this would be a change. I'm not advocating for a standalone public forum because I think the public hearings work. And I also know that you guys will respond to emails that are sent to you, or will at least take them into account. So thank you.
Could I just add one quick thing to that, please?
Sure.
Thank you. I thank you for those comments, Tiffany. I am going to beg you to commit to a public forum. It's an hour of your time, and this is a critical issue. Anyone who has a corner lot is impacted by this, and we have to hear from the community. I think it's just the best way to stay out of trouble when you're in a leadership position is to listen and to have this discussion at the same meeting that you are going to potentially approve it doesn't give you any chance to evaluate the comments of the public. So please, I'm begging you to have a public forum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Could we as council members commit to that now? Would we be willing to do that? Because I am. I mean, it's not a big deal, right? Just Niles, you're awesome. We'll set up a meeting for an hour and a half, and we'll just have a standalone meeting. Would that be okay? Will people commit to it?
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
Yeah, we have an election season coming up, so let's just try to, pace ourselves here. But certainly, I'll find an hour. I've spent plenty of other time on things that.
Okay. Todd, were you going to? Okay, great.
If this is going to not impact this house permit that's already happened, why do you? I mean, yes, can't you have your meeting then after the elections and later? I mean, there's no huge rush here to get this done.
And just as a point of reference, just for timing and everything, the next meeting of the council is actually going to be earlier in the month than it normally is, because by code or by charter, we have to approve the budget before May 15th. So the next meeting will be May 13th. Because it's a Thursday, so it's sort of convenient there. And so therefore this ordinance could not be approved by the code anyways until the June meeting. So
we need a public forum on it. I'm telling you, there will be this property rights don't go over well without a public forum. It's really, really important for your own safety and protecting us from getting sued. This is not just one little word. This is a takeaway to a property owner in some people's minds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Let me clarify, because maybe I didn't do a good job before. So under the county code, the county will apply what's called a side street setback or side street designation to a corner lot that adjoins another corner lot. Martin's Additions does not do that. Martin's Additions applies the same front setback and the same non-vegetative surface area requirement to all front yards of a corner lot, and also applies the same front-loading garage door width requirement for both front yards of a corner lot. So nothing's changing. We're just clarifying the language. And when the urban planner, Chris Jakubiak, was hired in 2009, this was a recommendation of his because a front-loading garage, especially if it's partially below grade or completely below grade, will add to the apparent mass of a structure. So a size limitation was proposed for the width. And see, that policy applies with respect to any front yard, because adjoining neighbors and those walking on the sidewalk are looking at that front facade of the house. And so, it's my opinion that the intent of the ordinance and how the ordinance was previously written, albeit unclear, was that the requirement, like all other requirements in the building code, apply to both front yards on a corner lot.
Thank you, Ron, but that's not the way people perceive front yards on corner lots. No one thinks of their side yard as a front yard. And so despite how you're calling it, this will the reason we're changing is because it will have an impact, and we really need the public to contribute. I'm begging you to do that.
Okay, we will, Holly, but as someone who lives on a corner lot, I can tell you that I've been aware for 36 years that my property is deemed to have 2 front yards. We will get to this. We'd like to wrap this up. We have a closed meeting at the end of this. So unless anyone has any comments that haven't already been stated, we may be ready to adjourn.
I think before we adjourn, first I just want to say, does any resident have a comment? I'm going to make a very, very quick comment, but any other residents before I do? Okay, I'll make this really quick. I know it's a long night. I just want to recognize Todd Mann. I see you. I don't see Katya, but I didn't know, quite frankly. It was a surprise, or just let's say I didn't know until the candidate statements came out who was running and who wasn't. And I just want to acknowledge Todd and Katya. We haven't always, seen eye to eye on things, but certainly as someone who's been on the council and recognizing it's volunteer time, all the efforts that you've put in, and I just want to say thank you. And recognizing we've got a lot of the great candidates who are going to be at the forum next week, and I hope everyone turns in. I expect it to be a wonderful set of discussions, but as we turn to the new, just recognizing those who have served, and I just want to thank you. And Todd, I'm seeing you, and you've done put a lot of time and effort in, and I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but you certainly have put everything into whatever it is that you've stood behind. So thank you.
Okay, Todd, I'm going to get my chance to express these very same sentiments and more next month. And then Arthur can have June. How's that?
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, so on that note, I believe we might be ready to adjourn this meeting. All in favor? Arthur, you're really ready. Okay.
Susan, before, if we're going to go,
All in favor? Aye.
I think Niles had something.
wait, aren't we going into the closed?
Closed session.
Yes.
So I have to read that
Yes.
statement.
Sorry, it gets technical sometimes.
Okay, so the council will entertain a motion in open session to enter into a closed session in accordance with section 3-305B1 of the Open Meetings Act to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction. Any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. So we need a motion.
I move that we move in out of open session, into closed session. I'm getting confused.
That's okay. We're all confused. We're all tired. Todd, would you like to second? Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Meeting is adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
We're entering into closed session now.